Have you seen my butt? It's really good. It's different from all the others. And I hate this thing. Okay, so time to get serious. Song of Kali by Dan Simmons is a 1985 horror novel. It's about 300-ish pages long. Boy, so much to be said about this. This is great. If you like being depressed and sickened and scared and a little bit feeling uncomfortable by the thought of being totally stranded in an extremely dangerous foreign country and having a existential crisis with actual forces of darkness that reach into your life and strike your innermost spirit and remind you that you're nothing but a weak and limited mortal, then this is definitely the book for you. And I'll explain. So basically, what we have here is some young, stupid, ambitious, snooty, weak-ass intellectual college English professor, writer, poet, some guy. I don't even remember his name. I think it's like Lincoln or something. But it doesn't matter. He's sympathetic. He's not an asshole, not totally, but he's kind of a coward, and that will make this book relatable to a lot of people because most people are, especially people that read fiction, are complete fucking cowards. And so, anyway, no, I'm just kidding. No, you're all very brave and smart and cool. So basically, so so he hears about this dude, this famous Indian poet who hasn't been seen for a long time. Already, it sounds like a typical horror story, and he lives in the giant megalopolis city called Calcutta, India. He's never been there, and his friend warns him not to go there, and he goes there anyway, and takes his family with him. And what proceeds is here's where this story gets almost perfect 10 out of 10 with me as a horror novel. Um, the immersiveness, the visualization, and the feeling, very well written, straightforward, not totally poetic, but in a sort of dreary, dreamlike pattern which interweaves with moments that are nonetheless hard hitting that wake you up at a very well paced, quick moving story, almost thriller pace, especially for something that was written from about 40 years ago. I mean, this is not a boring story. This is very captivating, and there's a little mystery that you want to unfold that leaks into some supernatural things. But at the same time, you're not totally sure of entirely of what's real and what is not. But to me, that just made everything more visually real or more viscerally experienced. And the hallmark of the story that makes it a memorable experience beyond that is that it is feels like a true classic gothic, but in a more modern, up to date setting. I know it's 40 years ago, but even in the 1980s, I mean, the world was moving at a certain pace that we get used to. But and most horror novels then, even to now, concern themselves with things like more, I would call, less intellectual fear, less existential fear, things that don't have a lot to say. The most scariest existential fear component of Song of Kali is the link between the sadness of most human beings in the world, especially in third world environments, that in places in the world that have been overcome by poverty and despair, and because of vices and lusts and addictions and things that lead people into these holes where they can't get out, they can't educate themselves, they can't get empowered or competent enough, and so they all kind of sort of use each other and betray each other in this vast, like, spider web, metaphorical spider web, this circle of darkness. And the best, most beautifully written passage is also probably the saddest, that you can't really fully appreciate until you've gotten like over the main story arc and the character arcs of the story towards the end, in which the main character talks about there being certain places, and the setting for this story so well realized is definitely one of these places where, in a sense, misery almost spiritually manifests and takes on a sort of metaphysical form. And in one sense, that is Kali, in a sense, without giving too much away. So but we're not, like I said before, it's rather different from most horror books that try to go for the traditional gothic approach, in the sense that uh, it's not, you're not entirely sure of what's happening and what's not. This book was easy to read and yet not fun to read. It's an experience that's very powerful and very challenging, which is usually the type of horror novel that it grows stronger and has a better experience in hindsight. But when you are reading it, you are truly depressed. It reminds me of watching like The Exorcist by William Friedkin, written by William Peter Blatty. Like basically, it is a powerful experience that makes you look in an area that you don't want to see, that the supernatural existential horror is connected to something that is all too familiar and all too real, which is the cruelty of living this life and mortality and the reality of poverty and lust and vices that enslave the people and reducing the human condition, and basically it's that weight and that subsequent lack of empathy in people, especially petty criminals or people who are competing in rigged yet unfair economic systems. The amount of corruption from especially petty things that are constant reminders of this. It's like the setting for the story and the essence of the story is like looking at some patient that has this sickening cancerous flesh-eating disease that is constantly reminding you of the absolute horrors that are in the world, and certain places in the world that are just totally infested by evil. And the evil is a sort of slow, menacing background thing that only sometimes manifests itself, and when you see it, it's something that's as shameful as it is frightening and powerful at the same time, and sickening too. And that is something that I fully didn't expect. And it's not the sort of thing where it's like a thriller type of fear. It's not so much a mortal type of fear, but it's something that in many ways is much worse. It's a lingering fear of the reality that there are dark forces in certain corners of the world that we don't understand. That makes it almost borderline a work of the occult, but not necessarily intentionally. So this is one of the most powerful and memorable horror novels I've ever read, but one of the least enjoyable for a good reason. And when I am reviewing horror novels, do I think that... Are you done yet? Do I think that that's a compliment? When I say I did not enjoy reading this for the story, but I enjoyed the prose heavily, or I enjoyed the pace of the story, the prose, moving through the story, uncovering the mystery, and just kind of investigating along with the main character what this is all about, and him. But that feeling of being caught up in a greater reality that lurks underneath our shallow, narrow-minded, modern, measurable form of reality, and then you realize how helpless and inexperienced you are, just like someone who's stranded in a foreign country who can't speak the language, surrounded by danger, and just constantly reminded that anything bad can happen, and also just customs which are normal by a lot of demoralized masses of people stuck in poverty. It's a lot of shallow, stupid people with no experience in third world situations or conditions would probably say that this has a xenophobic underlying feel, but it's actually much closer to my own experiences growing up in the West, and then experiences in South America and Mexico, and so only in certain parts of South America and Mexico. So basically, but it's not specific to India. It's any place in the world where there is a sort of spiritual disease, where enough people have collectively given up on anything greater, and they're resorting to idolatry, which is one of the most heinous and classic and historic of human evil. So this also makes it a very much relevant fantastorical that feels all too real in a modern setting, with all the vices that abusive modern systems, economic and technological, can bring. And that is truly horrifying. And so I would say that this is one of the best horror novels I've ever read. I give it a 9.5 out of 10. The only reason I don't give it a perfect 10 out of 10 is because the evil in the story is a little bit overpowering, so it sort of hurts the spirit, and that's not my particular favorite type of horror story, and so I just don't have it in me to sell this, to play up this story as more than the sum of its parts, because one of the things that evil does is it often deceives people by acting as though it is on the same par with the quality that is inherent in powers of goodness as it relates to fiction. I know that was a mouthful, and I didn't think I'd have this much to say about the book. It is borderline literary horror, if there is such a thing. Very well written, very effective, and it wouldn't be so much if Dan Simmons didn't have a lot of real life experience in situations like this. Overall, it is, in one word, unique. That's its strength. It's unique among horror novels. I would like to read stories that are on this level of quality, of power. So yeah, Song of Kali by Dan Simmons, 1985. It is a true gothic, a truly sinister, supernatural, existential nightmare of being stranded and confronted by dark forces that you don't understand, which you don't want to fuck around with because you just might find out. Yeah, Song of Kali, it's awesome. Check it out.